In the real world, in your practices, you see real patients who have obesity, diabetes, and other health conditions. What happens? Are you saying that of the last 1,000 people you saw, every one of them is perfectly healthy, no longer has blood sugar issues, no longer has weight issues? What is the reality of the real world? Because I bump into people that go, oh, I tried plant-based, it didn't work for me, or someone writes something negative online. And so when people follow it correctly, what is your experience? So does it sometimes not work? What is the actual results from your last 10 years of practice?
Well, I think the first thing in a community setting like what I'm in, I think Dr. Mills is pretty similar, and Dr. Fuhrman, you're getting people from everywhere. And they show up with varying levels of motivation, and that's a major factor. How motivated are you? And people have complicated lives. You know, a lot of people have spouses that try to undermine them. And so I think we have to recognize the challenge of working through the barriers to people doing this. And I think that's an important part of what we spend time on in our office. I don't really find anybody who attends our classes or talks to me and says, gosh, I just intellectually can't understand what you're saying. We don't have that, but we do have people that are very challenged. They have jobs, like nurses have jobs where they don't get breaks to eat. We have to work around that. They can't quit their job, you know. So I think the barriers and the motivation level can have a lot to do with who succeeds and who doesn't. I think the second thing is that the documentaries and everything have been great, and I'm glad to see there are so many more coming out. But we have this new phenomenon now with people binge watching documentaries over the weekend, wake up on Monday, I'm going to be plant-based, and they go get plant-based sausage and plant-based fake eggs, and then they get the fruit juice sweetened cookies. I mean, they really don't understand what a whole foods diet looks like. And that leads to, sometimes they figure out that's not the right thing to do, but we get people coming in and their food journal, what it looks like is they are avoiding animal foods, but they don't know what to eat instead. So they're piecing around, like people will say, I ate a banana for breakfast and I was still hungry. I'm sure you were, because that's not enough food. Well, I used to eat bacon and eggs for breakfast, so banana sounded good. So my point is, I think people need some help adopting the diet and doing it correctly. And I also think that they need some help in sitting down to figure out what's our implementation plan here. There's always an answer. I mean, I'm pretty creative. I can think of a way to do something with almost anybody's circumstances. But when you send people home and they're all psyched up about this and you don't take the time to do that, I think that becomes a barrier to success and people can get very discouraged. So I think that's some of the variability that you might be seeing.
I would agree with that 100%. And we've all heard the apocryphal story of, oh, I went plant-based, but I was so tired and I was so weak, I felt like I was going to die. And finally, I had to have a piece of meat. And then I felt better immediately. Well, the stuff was still in your stomach, so how could you feel better immediately? That was all psychological. But when I hear these stories, I ask the people, okay, what were you eating? And invariably, you guys tell me, what were they eating? French fries. Yeah, maybe. No, but they were doing a little bit better than that. Actually, they were eating salads and stir fry. And I tell them, there's your problem. Salads and stir fry, wonderful foods, but they're water and fiber and no calories. It's great if you're a rabbit, because rabbits weigh 3 pounds. But you are a human being, and human beings need calories. You need to eat food that is going to give your body enough calories and nutrients to make it through the day. My mantra is this, and I want you guys to memorize this. Going plant-based is like having sex. If you didn't enjoy it, you weren't doing it right. Okay? Because when you do plant-based right, your story's like Gary. You wake up saying, my God, I feel great. And if you don't have that experience, you're not doing something properly. I had a guy with diabetes who was coming into the free clinic, and his blood sugars were terrible, all over the place. And people started writing in his chart, non-compliant, you know, da-da-da, except that this guy was very faithful, would bring in his little book with all his blood sugars, and he never missed an appointment. The problem was he was Spanish-speaking only. And whenever he came in, there was no interpreter. So people would go in and talk loudly to him as though that was going to make him understand English. But he really didn't understand what he was expected to do. I insisted we get an interpreter, sat down and talked to him about not eating at greasy food joints. He was a truck driver. That's going to make his insulin, his medicines not work. It's going to make his blood sugar go all over the place. He's got to start being more plant-based, taking food with him. Next time that guy came to clinic, his blood sugar record was beautiful. So as Pam said, it's all about making sure that people have the tools for success and that we're not setting them up for failure. That we take that energy and drive and that they have and channel it properly so that they can succeed at what they really want to do.
Yeah.
I'll just add one or two little things, is that we all have our difficulties over our careers with people who know what to do, want to do it, and can't do it, and don't do it, don't eat healthy. And it's not about plant-based or anything like that. It's usually the things that drive addictions and people's inability to eat healthy is usually their addictions to sweets, and their addiction to oil, and their addictions to salt. And it's all mixed up, and so it's not just they're eating meat; they're also eating processed foods and honey and all kinds of sweeteners, and they're having too much salt in their diet. So we are asking a lot of people. We're asking them to make a radical change in the way and it affects their taste buds because their high levels of being acclimated to sweet foods have deadened their taste for the natural good taste of a berry that's not as sweet, and they're salting their food so they can't taste vegetables anymore. And they've had the oil, so they can't, so in other words, they're used to the caloric rush of entering the bloodstream, and they're almost getting high off these foods. And so over the years, I think that we've addressed a lot of the style of our practices to help people remove the obstacles to healing. And, with having courses and professionals that specialize in food addiction, and opportunities where people get support system, and get support and get information and get targeted addressing those concerns and what to do. And so whether it's web support or whether it's coming away to a place where they can be there long term and be away from their addictions to staying long enough, or whether it's getting into a Zoom conference into their home, or whether it's setting up with diet buddies or setting up with partners in their communities and what are they called, dinner meetups and things. So in other words, we've tried to utilize in our professional life offering services that help people get over their addictions and increase the probability and likelihood they're going to stay with this long term and have really good understanding of those obstacles that might have derailed them in the past and made them fail being successful on a diet. And we've become better at this over the decades, at doing this and developing these skills with people. So it's complicated because people are complicated and they've been derailed in all different directions, and we're trying to help them as best as we can.
So if the question is, if you have a diabetic patient whose C-peptide suggests taking insulin, and they're willing to do the diet and lifestyle factors long enough to achieve optimum weight, what percentage of those are not going to be able to achieve more normal blood sugar levels? And it's an exception. So if you can control people's behavior long enough, you're going to expect that the majority of diabetics are going to be able to achieve, of type 2 diabetics are going to achieve normal or more normal blood sugar levels and eliminate the need for medication. Now, what percentage of people can you get to do that? It's the same question you ask about obesity. Like, how many people that are obese do you think, if they adopt a whole plant food SOS-free diet, get moderate exercise and adequate sleep, will not lose weight? You know, you just don't see it. They're going to lose weight. And the average weight loss for a male is about 3 pounds a week. For a female, about 2 pounds a week, in my experience. And so do some people lose slower? Yes, there are some people that lose weight at a slower rate than others because it's a bell curve. But I don't have anybody so far that can't achieve weight loss if they're willing to do enough of these different things. The problem is some people have to work a lot harder at it than others because they got more, like you mentioned, more roadblocks, more challenges, less support. But don't confuse that with the fact that a whole plant food SOS-free diet won't help type 2 diabetics achieve normal blood sugar levels. Different issue.
Can I ask my colleagues something? Because I get asked this a lot by patients. They say, well, how should I do this? Should I just wean off things slowly, or should I just try and cut everything off, all at once? I'll tell you what my bias is. I tell them, you're going to have to lay on the floor, kick, scream, and just roll around until you get over it. In other words, you need to go cold turkey. That's my bias. But what do you guys feel?
I agree, because I always discuss this with people all the time, that when you have a foot in both worlds, it puts you under more stress and makes it more difficult, because you don't see the miraculous benefits from doing it all the way. And you also, continuing to have those triggers keep you always, your addictions going, and make you want to have more of the bad stuff. A little bit leads to more, and continuing to want that. And also, it makes you never really get your taste buds acclimated, or your body changed over to really get to like this more. So I'm over the years, the way I've modified my advice to a degree over the years is actually to insist on abstinence and to become more strict in making sure people comply with everything I want, because if I can get them to link together enough months of doing that, it gets easier for them to stay with this and want to do it long term. It actually makes it more difficult when they keep going back into the old way and thinking that's going to help them, and baby steps and all this baby step stuff and the cheat diet and all this stuff. You get more recidivism that way than just insisting that abstinence works. This way of eating is addicting, and when you get a person off cocaine, you don't have them going back on cocaine on weekends. When you want a person to come off the alcohol, you don't have them go to the bar and having drinks. You want them to stay away from the alcohol. They have a better chance of staying away from it long term.
I agree. Our diet is a little bit different than some others, but it's a pretty radical change for most people. And I think that the problem with people, I think prescriptive communication is needed. And I've used this example a lot. When people go to the pharmacy and pick up a prescription, the pharmacist just doesn't hand it to them and say, here's some drugs, take some, not too many, okay? I mean, it's very specific. You're going to take one with food 3 times a day. No less than 6 hours apart. But it's very specific, and people know what to do. So when you get into this baby steps thing, and let's drink water this week, and then, well, first of all the bad stuff's still in the house, and that's a temptation. And it leads to this, and I see this in people who try to do this on their own. They keep thinking that they're doing better while they're not. And I teach by analogy. So I started using this with my folks. I mean, I tell them, listen, right now, you keep saying you're getting a little bit better, but it's sort of like last year I filed my tax return in December, and the penalties and fees and everything were awful. This year I'm doing so much better because I did it at Thanksgiving. Okay, so I saved $10 in fines, but you were still late. And here's the deal: you got to turn that thing in on April 15th, right? That is the hard date. So people delude themselves into thinking that they're doing better. They do it with exercise, they do it with food. And so I think that there's room for people to adopt this diet in different ways, provided that it's prescriptive and there are benchmarks and the expectations are very clear and the communication is prescriptive, and we're going to measure progress on adherence to some kind of standard. They'll be better off. That's what they're coming to us for. They're not coming to us for them to, they don't come to us for us to say, well, whatever you want to do this week. I tell my people at the office, we're not letting the inmates run the asylum here. Okay, we're gonna be the people that drive the process, because we're the people who have some experience in doing it.